Hello and hello, everybody. Welcome and happy Friday to all of you. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, I am Irona Boster, certified speaker and communications coach, life coach, speaker, author, podcaster. And I do all of those fun things because I live and breathe at the functionality of the intersection of communication and healthy, balanced leadership. I love helping people communicate with purpose and integrity with themselves and with all those around them. Now, before I introduce our incredible guest for today, I have a request for anyone listening or watching. As this series continues, I would love your impact for communication, your input, apologies, for communication topics that interest you. You see, it is my firm belief that communication runs a lot deeper than we give it credit for. So I'm going to ask you not to be afraid to stretch the limits of where and when and how it shapes your life, and then DM me your ideas, drop them in the comments, or even email them to me at ironaboster.com. All right, on that note, let me tell you about a little bit about our incredible guest today before we jump into our conversation. So, Tom Dahlberg. I hope I said your name right. Tom, did I say your last name right?
Perfect.
Good enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Tom has been named a healthcare disruptor and a mental health champion by Authority Magazine and Ruckus Maker, and by the patient experience community. He has over 40 years of extensive healthcare leadership experience, and Tom is a disciple of Jesus, a devotee of Mother Mary, and a voice for agape-centered care models and servant leadership. I don't know why that word trust just kind of decided it wasn't going to roll off my tongue. But I also want to note that Tom is an internationally recognized speaker and writer with an expertise in leading with love, heart, and mind communication, stopping bullying, amplifying positive childhood experiences, and bringing love in action to all we do. Tom is a coach to healthcare leaders as well as young men and women all over. So, on that note, given Tom's wide and extensive expertise and knowledge, it, for me, made a lot of sense for us to talk about what's lighting him up most these days, which is a focus in the anti-bullying world. So, Tom, I wanted to open up this conversation with an observation and a very important question. When we talk about bullying, most people think of the behavior, what someone did or what someone said. But your work, it goes a lot deeper. It goes into the heart, into the nervous system, and into the relationships that shape how we treat one another. So, from your perspective, what actually creates a culture where bullying can take root? And what in particular is the thing that begins to heal it?
Mm. Well, first of all, Your Honor, thank you for inviting me here. And for you and for anyone else watching and listening, you may see I'm wearing a jersey atop that says Chevrolet here. And the reason I wear that is back in, I think it was 1796, Bishop John Chevreuse said to his bishop, his one of, he said, send me wherever I can help. And so when we think about the journey our family's been on with bullying, when people reach out, I'm like, God, send me where I can help. And so when you reached out and we said, well, let's talk about this, that felt so close to my heart because it is so close to our family. And we see this topic from a personal perspective, from a research perspective, and otherwise. And the other piece that I wanted to mention early on was when we think about the data and the research, and we're going to talk about all that, we also have to, so that's connecting at the mind level. We also want to connect at the heart level. And a wonderful way to do that is through story. And as many folks know, Maya Angelou said, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. So we take that to heart as well. And so as we start this conversation, I really just want to let folks know what my lens is and what drives a lot of my answers and thinking. And it really goes back many, many years to actually, I'll say it a little bit differently. A few years ago, our son, so my bride is Doc and my son is Tommy. Our son Tommy came out to my outdoors to my bride and I as we're out back. This is in Maine, and he said, "Mom and Dad, I need to tell you something." He said, he said, when I was in fourth grade, and he's 30 now, he said the pain was so great, the pain from bullying, from being bullied. I put a belt around my neck because I didn't want to be here anymore. So that
Yeah.
drives a lot of why we as a family are in this space. And the bullying for Tommy actually started years and years and years prior to that. So fourth grade, I believe you're 8 years old. When he was born, he was born with neurological challenges. He was born as a big
Yeah.
kid.
Okay.
And by the time he was 4, he was being bullied predominantly by adults. So
Oh.
yeah, so my
Hmm.
bride and I, we thought we were the worst parents ever for our child, our beautiful little boy, to be bullied by adults. And yet we learned it wasn't an aberration. And in fact, if we think about high reliability organizations deferring to experts, I deferred to experts. I reached out because I didn't know.
Right,
We didn't
right,
know.
of course.
And what I learned was it wasn't an aberration, that I believe it's like 37% of 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 students are bullied by teachers. 42% of youth athletes are bullied by coaches, and I could give more and more data
Oh.
points.
Mm.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
and my bride and I, we made every mistake possible. We made things worse for our son and for our 2 daughters, trying to figure out what to do and how to create a culture. Try to, well, first of all,
Mm.
to help our son. And so I'll finish this up really quickly. So what happened was I prayed and prayed and prayed, and I said, "How can I help my son?" And eventually it came to me. It said, "My son is being bullied because of his body. How can I help him
Mm.
love his body?"
Mm.
And this took a long, long time. And
Yeah.
he came to us at one point. He says, back then, I think he was about 8. No, younger than that. He says, "I want to play basketball. I want to go play
Mm.
basketball." And it scared me because he was a big
Mm.
kid. And he was already being bullied by adults and then by his
Right.
peers. And so, like I said, I prayed. And long story short, it came to me. He wants to play basketball. He's a bigger kid. How can I teach him to learn to love himself? And so I taught him how to rebound, because a bigger child is well positioned physically to get rebounds, and which is an incredibly important part of the game of basketball. And so we just went outside, and it wasn't like, now you need to learn this. The culture we
Right.
tried to create was just, let's just have some fun. Let's just go out.
Mm.
I'm going to shoot. And I was a terrible
Yeah.
shooter, so lots of rebounds. And I taught him how to rebound. So now he's playing basketball. He's boxing out. He's ripping the ball. He's rebounding, to the point as a young boy, 6, 7, 8, where the high school coach is now saying, "I want my high school athletes to learn from you, Tommy." And, and so he learned to love himself. And so, and I tell you all that because then I was journaling about this, and someone asked me to write a blog about it. And that started to
Yeah.
get out there. And all of a sudden, I'm getting recognized for telling the story and what we did and how we helped our son. And I'm on the news shows and speaking. As I mentioned at the beginning,
Yeah.
years later, I learned my son tried to commit suicide. You talk about humbling.
Yes.
Here I am being seen as an expert. I was no expert. I was someone trying to help.
You know,
And go ahead.
this goes to a really important point that I often work with parents on, which is to understand that you don't raise your children in isolation. We don't. We don't raise our children in isolation. We raise them in a world where they are going to be impacted by all the environments that they walk through. And it can go from one small incident to repetitive incidences that change the nature of the way they experience those environments and they see themselves in those environments. And the problem is a lot of parents take this level of responsibility of I should have known better. And I say this from a very personal experience that I'm not going to go into and delve into the details of, but a parent who I was working with and having found out something about for her daughter, feeling so burdened by the guilt of that and almost ashamed as a parent, almost ashamed as a human being
Mhm.
for that for not knowing, the not knowing. And so the first thing I want to do is just acknowledge and recognize you as a parent, that you're a perfectly imperfect human. And it means you're not all knowing, right? Only God is all knowing. We're not all knowing. We can't beat ourselves up for the things we didn't know. What we
Mm.
can do is decide how we want to walk forward with the knowledge we now have, right? And the most important thing, because you said this in your story, is you started by connecting your son, to something he could love. And you found a way with him to shape something just through simple connection, not through teaching him the semantics and drilling him and things like that, right? But rather just saying, let's create this from a space of love and
Mhm.
enjoyment and connectivity between ourselves and our child first, and then we'll get into the semantics, but it's got to be shaped through connection. And
Mhm.
so if we span out, when we think about bullying, a lot of times I believe bullying comes from a place where, and just I believe this through the knowledge that I have gleaned as an educator, as somebody who's comes from that field, is because, and I'm going to go to the bully side first. A lot of times, those kids are acting, their behaviors are exhibiting something that they lack. Right, and it's usually a place of connection. It's usually a place of security. They don't have a secure environment, right? And so on the bullied side, on the person who's being bullied, their parents are usually more connected to them than the bully's parents or the bully's primary caregivers are. And what often happens is the bullies, there's something in them that it's a lot about projection. I
Mm.
sense not a weakness in you, but a security in you that you have something that I lack. And they come at it from this place of like, I'm going to pick on you because I'm projecting from a place of my insecurities. Now, and this is really important, does that mean their behavior should be accepted? Absolutely, without a doubt, no. No, 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 no. It does not mean that we should excuse their behaviors. It does not mean that we should justify their behaviors. Those actions are not acceptable, period. And it also means that we shouldn't, on the side of the child who has more compassion and has the ability to be connected with their families, does that mean that they should accept the bad behaviors? No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so therefore, the question becomes, what can we do to bridge that divide?
Yeah.
What can we do? And what can educators do? And what can administrators do? What can people do who are the ones who are most impactful in a child's life? What can they do?
Exactly. To every point you just mentioned. And oftentimes what we seek out is the easy button.
Mm.
It's like, well, if a child was bullied, therefore they're bullying. Therefore, the answer is this. Not necessarily. In healthcare, we talk about individualized patient care. In this space, that child who's exhibiting bullying behaviors, it could be because they're being abused. It could be because lots of different reasons. The point is, though, we need to seek to understand and not excuse.
Right.
The other piece, now I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, where home of Rocky Marciano and Marvin Hagler, and back when I was growing up, and maybe others, bullying, oh, just rub some dirt on it, get back out there.
Right.
We missed the point then, and we still miss it oftentimes today. So when we think about adverse childhood experiences, when we think about the different aspects of adverse childhood experiences, things that children are experiencing before they're 18, abuse, neglect, mental illness of a parent or guardian, substance abuse, and so forth. When we think about those things and the impact they have on a child's life at the moment, medium, and then long term, and in some cases eternally, um, in 2017, I believe the CDC defined now bullying as an ACE, as an adverse childhood experience, because of the significant adverse impact of what happens to children from bullying. And so we have a huge opportunity before us. And when we think about ACEs, I was blessed to engage with Dr. Christina Bethel out of Johns Hopkins years ago and talk about positive childhood experiences and how getting to the culture, getting to what we can do. And there's all different ways to look at this. What can we do from a culture perspective to help these children, both the children that exhibit the behavior and the victims of? What can we do to stop the bullying at that moment? What can we do to prevent the bullying? So there's all different lenses to look through. When we think about that cultural piece, what's also interesting, Your Honor, is these positive childhood experiences translate into adulthood, translate into when we think about a healthy or a loving organization. They almost be identical. So as an example, when we think about positive childhood experiences, and I'll take one last tangent, what Christina Bethel found was the lack of positive childhood experiences in a child's life is more important than the adverse childhood experience in a child's life.
Yes. Okay. So I want to jump into that really quickly because I think this is super, super, super important. But before we jump into, right, because what we're talking about here is the counterbalance, right? How do we create a counterbalance to it? We're not saying that we're going to be able to eliminate all adverse childhood experiences. What we're saying is that there has to be some kind of conduit to a counterbalance to help create a lifeline for that child to change and transition and grow, and not taking it we can't remove the adverse childhood experience. Now, I think this is really important. I would love it if you have, and I don't know if you do, but if you can give the distinction between an adverse childhood experience and trauma, because I think we have a problem here. I think a lot of people, and now I'm not, so they're not mutually exclusive, right? It's not a situation where an adverse childhood experience could also be a trauma, but adverse childhood experience could also be without trauma, right? So there's a distinction there. Sometimes adverse childhood, tripping my own self, an ACE, right, doesn't necessarily have trauma, capital T, right? So can you express that, the differences, like what it is?
I would point people to Becky Haas, Jen Frazier, and when we really think about those distinctions, because I wouldn't want to do harm to that part of the discussion.
Okay.
I will say this, that the trauma, when that capital T is there, related to ACEs, related to bullying, which is now defined as an ACE,
right,
children are 9 times more likely to attempt suicide if they've been bullied.
Right.
50% of all children who have been bullied have suicidal ideation. So when we think about the level of impact of bullying, of the ACEs, it's significant. That's why I used the term eternal earlier.
Right. Right.
There was a child, his name was Seven Bridges, and he had 26 surgeries, and he had a colostomy bag, and he was bullied relentlessly at school for the reasons you can imagine.
Right.
Awful, absolutely awful. He ended up committing suicide. This poor child, who is so courageous, so vulnerable, went through so much. And the parents said, to your earlier point, we screwed up. They took the blame, they took the shame, or they lived the shame. We screwed up. We did this. And we talk about now trauma to the parents and the family and others.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so significant. from a scientific and a research basis, I don't want to go there. Like I said, Becky Haas, Jim
Right.
Frazier, yourself, I'm sure,
I think that's
can go
important.
there.
Yeah.
But the significant impact is just beyond.
Yeah. We have somebody who made a comment, wow, 50% of children who have been bullied have suicidal ideation. That is so alarming. You know, it's interesting. There's so many subtle nuances with all of this, right? Suicidal ideation is not necessarily the same thing as suicidal attempts. It's not necessarily the same thing as, and even suicidal attempts for attention are different than suicide attempts that are, you know, not looking for attention seeking, right? So there are so many different distinctions. And again, so trauma is different than adverse childhood experiences. And I want people to understand there are all of these nuanced differentiations that we do need to unpack together. Because I think in this day and age, we unfortunately have this tendency to over label something and try because we're trying to oversimplify it when it's really not simple. And this is the problem that we're experiencing. We're desperately trying to simplify things that are excessively complex. And I want people to understand the difference that bullying is not kids being kids, right? It's classified as an ACE for a specific reason because it has long-term psychological, physiological, neurological, and psychological consequences. That's the distinction there. So whereas the old school thinking of kids being kids, there's a differentiation. And I want to do that, explain this through a story. Yesterday, my son had a sleepover with his best friend. And we took them to I took them to Hurricane Harbor. We had so much fun, etc. Now the boys were doing their little tussling around in the water. They were kind of like dunking on each other, and then they even like they were saying things to each other. They were ribbing on each other. Ribbing on each other is kids being kids, is boys
Mhm.
doing this, you know, that old adage of boys are just boys being boys. Boys being boys does have a certain categorization, right? Boys are more physical. They tend to be a lot more like, I'm going to rib on you, you're going to rib on me. It's a cooperative, collaborative exchange of that versus the distinction of bullying where it's constant name calling, demeaning. It's putting somebody into a place of less than. It is making them feel bad for something that they have no control over. It is doing certain things, right, that are different. Now, something that my son experienced the with this other child who's no longer in the school, and I'm very grateful for it. He wasn't in the school this last year, but he had been in his school system since preschool with this other child. And this other child, they were really good friends. And out of nowhere, they would be playing, they would be fine, and suddenly the child would just turn and punch him really hard in the stomach and the arm, slam him into a wall. He came back from school one day with a massive goose egg on his head. I was like, "What happened?" "Oh, so and so pushed me in the bathroom." And it wouldn't be like a little, you know, it would be actively hurting him. And then I found out that this child was doing things to many of the kids. Out of nowhere, he'd be fine one moment and all of a sudden do something like that. And what now I'm not going to assume I know anything about the home, although I did learn some things. I'm going to try to be as vague as possible here. I did learn some things that made sense for why he was doing these sudden physical outbursts of violent behavior and highly inappropriate behavior to some of the other kids. Uh, and yet my son kept calling him a friend. And when that would happen, when his friend would do these things to him, what would happen to my son? He would shut down. He would freeze. He didn't know how to react. And I would ask him when I would find out about this, and sometimes it was the principal calling me. They were fine on the playground and suddenly they're in lunch and the other kid turns and wails on his arm and we're like, you know. A couple things with this. Number one, I would ask Connor what would he do? And you know, what was he doing? And he was like, I was waiting for an adult to notice. And he wouldn't react. And I said, okay, we've got a couple of things that you can do here, right? And I would always go over, number one, you can use your words. You can tell him to verbally. Number two, you can walk away. You can tell him, I am not okay with this. I'm going to walk away. Number three, you can defend yourself when we're going to do some defensive moves, right? But it's hard when it comes out of nowhere. And number four, you can tell an adult. And why did I do it in this particular order? Was because I wanted him to learn how to speak up for himself and defend himself first before turning to an authority figure. And there's a reason for that. Because I see a lot of times where the schools are constantly telling our kids, come to an adult first, always come to an adult first. But what that's teaching them is you don't have any ability to defend yourself. You're not allowed to defend yourself. It's not okay that you defend yourself. It's no, 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 no. Come and seek an adult authority because you couldn't possibly take care of it for yourself. And so then when one of our kids does, when they fight back, when they defend themselves physically, when they do these things, and then they equally, because this is the second part I want to make, they equally get pulled aside. They equally get in trouble. The schools have these zero tolerance policies where it's like, well, both kids were involved, so both kids need to be held accountable. I'm gonna sound very controversial here, but I'm not okay with that. Because an action and a reaction are two completely different things. And a defensive measure is completely different than an offensive measure. And somebody who is attacking you, you're telling that other child they don't have the right to defend themselves. They are never going to learn how to do that. They're always going to be seeking authority. And you know what's going to happen? They are going to fall apart. They are going to move into, you are taking away one of their primary sources of the hyperarousal state, which is fight. You have a right to defend. And I don't like this. So I have said enough controversial stuff, and I would like to know your opinion on this.
There's so much there, and I do want to hit on hopefully all of it. First of all, defining bullying: unwanted, aggressive, power imbalance, targeted, intentional, repetitive. It's these types of things. So the joking around, the ribbing, as you called it, it's not bullying. It's not bullying. So I love that point. The point about how you explain to your child the order in which to, you're teaching agency.
Yep.
Which is so important nowadays, because how often are we through movies, through books, through how we teach our kids, we're telling them, give up your agency, give it up, go seek a superhero, go seek, and you had within that know when to seek that other figure who else can help there. And I love you brought the point: complex adaptive systems, healthcare, schools, youth sports programs. Each of us is a complex adaptive system. There is no easy button. There is no easy button. There is these types of things. So, and then most importantly, I do want to hit it. Well, all of it's important, but most importantly, I want to hit on what you said about zero tolerance policies, because it may seem controversial, but it's absolutely not, because the research shows zero tolerance policies makes bullying within school systems worse.
Yeah.
Makes it absolutely worse. Now, if you go to stopbullying.gov, it's right in there. They have a whole section on misdirections and stopping bullying. Humanity has huge hearts. We have good intention. You know, what's the old saying? The highway to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
We need to balance this heart and this intention with our minds, with the evidence. Zero tolerance policies leads to worse bullying, leads to incredible harm. The reason being is the threat of suspension or expulsion of that child who's exhibiting the bullying behaviors. There is such potential for repercussions within the school, within the neighborhood, within the city, within the town, that the victim of bullying and their families get to the point where, no, I'm not going to say anything, because that child getting punished like that will come back on us.
And this is the problem that we're currently existing in. If we have this zero tolerance policy, if we have this, and I'm not gonna, get on a high horse about this, but in humans, there's a hierarchy of need. eh, there's a hierarchies for a reason, right? And the same thing is true of our actions and our reactions. There's a hierarchy of response mechanisms. There's escalations and de-escalations because this is how we function. It's not all this, right? I have a client who was giving a talk recently, and she talks about this from a place of fair isn't giving everyone the same thing. Fair is giving everyone what they need. It's not doing the same thing for everyone. And there's a huge distinction. That's not exactly how she phrases it, but this is my interpretation of it, right? So there's a huge distinction. We're not going to stay fair across the board by treating everybody the same way. We're going to give each individualized person what they need in those experiences. So if we're talking about somebody who is the bully, they need something different than the child who's being bullied. And that means we, as the responsible adults, need to respond differently.
And each child who's exhibiting bullying behavior is not the same either. So they need something different.
Right.
Bill
Exactly.
Parcells, a famous NFL coach, said years and years ago, he says, I treat everyone fairly. I don't treat everyone the same. To your
There we
point.
go. Exactly. Exactly. It's not about treating everyone exactly the same. And this distinction requires, again, a nuanced conversation. And what I fear is that, and especially this has become excessively apparent since COVID, that because administrators are tapped thin, because teachers are tapped thin, because all of them are tapped thin, and their tendency is to let me move. We don't have enough resources to address this, so let's just have a blanket response across the board. That's becoming more problematic, and yes, COVID unfortunately had a mass exodus from the education system, you know, um, and I love that. Thank you. Let me just make sure I'm reading this right. Dr. Mariella Henry is saying equity versus equality, right? There's a distinction there.
Yeah.
This is really problematic that we're dealing with. So how do we bank on externalizing the resources if our people are tapped? Because I'm going to say this quite honestly, I see it all the time. Administrators are tapped out, teachers are tapped out. It is very unfair of us to expect so much from people who have so little ability to do this. If you've got a classroom of 25 to 35 children, and you're trying to manage all of that, how do you do that with tapped out resources, with that inability, right? How do we craft spaces and places where they can have access to resources so that they can nuance their approach better for our children? How?
Well, first of all, I'd say stop doing what's creating more harm. Zero tolerance policies creates
Let's
more
start
harm,
there.
creates
Okay.
more of a problem. You may be familiar with conflict resolution and peer mediation, which
Mm,
as a tool or as tools is terrific for many reasons, not for bullying. The science shows, the evidence shows what we're doing here is basically saying, well, I'll say it differently. Bullying is not a conflict, it's a victimization. So
yes.
that should take it right off the table.
Thank
Number
you.
two, and this goes to something you said earlier, what we are saying when we go to this place is, you're both part of the problem. The person,
Yes.
the child who is exhibiting the behavior, we're going to bring you two together. You all work it out. It's talk about a victim of bullying saying, I don't want to do this. I will just be
Right.
abused even more so in this space. So, long
Right.
story short, it doesn't work. Now, I'll tell you one more that we need to
Right.
stop doing. And again, the evidence supports this. Good intentioned. There are many school systems and other programs that are using group treatment for children. So, what they're doing is they're saying, okay, for all these children that are exhibiting bullying behaviors, we're going to bring you together. We're going to educate you on what bullying is and what it isn't. We're going to teach you how not to bully. We're going to do all this. Evidence shows, again, good intentioned, evidence shows what those things do is create a network, a community of children who are exhibiting bullying behaviors that now support one another in a community to continue and exacerbate the problem.
Hmm.
So, to your specific
Oh,
question, stop doing what's creating more harm. Follow the evidence.
you know what? That is such an important piece of the puzzle because we are thinking that we can do this in group treat. We are thinking that we can do this in group mentality, but the problem is that the mentality that got them to that place first needs to be dismantled at an individual level before before a support system can be created. And that is a problematic situation there, right? Because it's kind of like if you took, uh, okay, this is not exactly likening it, but if you took like 10 serial killers and you put them all together, right? I mean, come on, right? We're just, because we're saying that okay, bullying is a public health issue, but it needs to be dismantled on an individual characteristic basis because it's not all made up of the same circumstances. It may be a public health issue, but the individualization of the behaviors need to be addressed first. And it's funny because of coming from the system that I come through, we created these what we called individualized family service plans, IFSPs. And IFSPs recognize that the individual family dynamics are at play in the development of their child. And it's really, and then we look at it from okay, here's the child specific things, here's the family dynamic specific things. Let's work on that on an individualized basis first, and then give them support mechanisms for moving forward together. And I love this. As somebody made a comment that helping teachers respond to bullying cannot rely only on adding more programs or expecting individual educators to fix a culture problem alone. We have to equip them with practical tools, shared responsibility, and systems that make kindness, belonging, and accountability part of everyday school life. So here's the caveat. Creating a system for the educators and the parents is important, but the individual person experiencing the bullying or being the bully and the individual child experiencing the bully, that needs to be addressed on an individualistic place. We can't do that in group process. We can create programs for the educators so that they can take those programs and resources and support structures and use them individually.
Absolutely. And I love that you said that. And in fact, I bring this to healthcare a great deal. In healthcare, we're all about population health, health of the population. We can't lose sight of the individual within that population. And in fact, even when we think about clinical research, average research, when they talk about the research is this and it shows this, that's based on an average man, not even an average woman. It's typically almost based on an average man. Well, there is no average man, and we just excluded women, and so we have to get it to the end. That's individualized patient care. So
Right. That's like the medicine bottles, right? You have right. A lot of people don't understand that the dosing is based off of the research that was done on primarily on pretty much all male male
exactly,
related research. Oh my goodness, yes. It requires nuance. It does require a nuanced approach, but it also requires a systemic support system.
yeah,
Right? It requires nuanced approach that is supported by a system structure. And it's interesting because somebody else also made a comment, and I think this comes back to it, build a culture of belonging before bullying happens. And the issue that I see there is that sometimes the bullying starts from, so say the child in the home is experiencing bullying. So they're already coming in with a particular mindset and a particular psychology that's already developed. It's not that the bullying isn't going to happen, but you can create a culture that creates lifelines for that person so that even though they're experiencing that adverse childhood experience in the home, they have the lifeline support because they've got a culture of belonging in the school. They've got a culture of belonging from, maybe it's, and I've heard this before, it's literally that one friend that they go over to their house and they see how they do parenting, and that becomes their lifeline.
yeah,
So that they're in that home and they're experiencing that kind of parenting, and it's giving them a differentiation for the kind of parenting they're experiencing in their home.
absolutely. And I love that you said that piece of it so much. Yeah, I love the belonging piece. Let me say it this way: it's both and or all the above. We need systematic within the school systems and youth sports programs and dance programs and performance arts. We need it within positioning with parents and so forth. And we need the individual connection. In
Yes.
fact, I love that you just brought that seeing another parent. So when you think about positive childhood experiences, there's 7 of them. The first one
Mm.
is, and again, these are so strong, they mitigate bullying and other ACEs. And when you hear them, you think about, really, that's it? Yes. Because at the end of the day, from my perspective, it's about love. So what we're talking about is communication. The ability to talk about our feelings with family is the positive childhood experience. Family or guardians may be part of that. When we can't do that, when that child who's exhibiting the bullying behavior, when we recognize that family unit, whatever that looks like, is not allowing for that, that tells us a
Mm.
lot. It also leads to potential
Right.
solution plans, that individualized care plan. Number
Yeah.
2, support. The sense that family will stand up during difficult times, that someone has that within the family has that child's back. And I'm going to go fairly quickly because I know we're running out of time here.
Okay.
That's incredibly important. Belonging. I love that someone in the chat said belonging. Here's the challenge.
Mm.
And within our sports programs we do, we really strive to do hit on this. What we often hear and what we often strive for is someone feels like they belong. What we try to do is say, no, no, that's part of it, but they need to
Mhm.
truly belong. And there's a difference. There's perception and
Yes.
there's reality. And at the end of the day, perception will get lost. So we need to,
Yes. Oh my God, that's such a big one because I see this happen so frequently. Just because you play the same game doesn't mean you have the same values.
yeah,
And it
absolutely.
comes from a value place first. It comes from how you cultivate belonging really is about seeing the individual for who they are and seeing their strengths and supporting them in their weaknesses. And that's really important. And I think that that gets lost in the shuffle of, well, we're all here to play this game together. And, it's like, okay, so you all have something you like to do, but there's all different reasons for why you like to do it.
Absolutely.
And so one kid might like it because they love kicking the ball, and another kid might like it because they love passing the ball, and another kid might like it because so you see there's a nuanced difference. And another kid might like it because they get to chat with their friends or rib on each other or do or laugh with each other. And another it's in that. It's belonging is actually about recognizing the individual in the group.
Absolutely. And I love that you
Yeah.
said all of that, but especially I had players on my teams, my basketball teams, that were great athletes that wanted to be better. I had
Mm.
players that just wanted to be with friends,
Yes,
and we
yes.
all belonged. It was a
Yeah,
community. It was a
right.
community, and it's so incredibly important.
And acknowledging that, right? So when the coach does a thing like, "Oh my god, I see how much you're the one who makes all your friends laugh when especially when the team is losing.
Yeah,
That is awesome, buddy. Keep doing that because you're helping the morale, right? Oh, I see that you're the strong kicker. We're gonna make sure you're or you're the great goalie, or you're like, I see that's your strength. I see it's the identification, right? Hey, I
yes,
see you're struggling with, like the kid who's feels awkward and is uncoordinated. They want to be a part of it, right? But they're really uncoordinated. Look, listen, long, long time ago, when I was a kid, I was in awe of the gymnasts, Nadia Comaneci and Mary Lou Retton and all of them. And I was always like, oh man, I would love to be a gymnast because I was fascinated by it, but I was excessively uncoordinated. I was never going to be a gymnast. Now, if I could have been there and been like a support, maybe that would have been my role. Everybody has an individual role in the bigger picture. And when we identify that and highlight those individual roles of what makes them so strong in the bigger picture, we can do that instead of just saying, you're too weak for this play, I'm going to sit you out on the bench, or you're we have, and as a species, one of the reasons why we identify the lesser values first is because of our survival instinct.
hmm
So we tend to be like, and coaches, and I've seen, we see this with coaches, right? You're not good here. I'm not putting you into that. And we
Absolutely.
tend to identify the don'ts and the no's and the bad things and the negatives first, and it's all about because of our survival instinct. And I could go on and on about that, but I'm not going to today. But what's important is to reverse that, right? Just like creating positive childhood experiences, we have to create positive recognition. It doesn't mean everybody gets a trophy, though. And that's something I want people to understand, because again, that everybody gets a trophy mentality is the whole fair is fair, equal treatment, equal, same, 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 same. No, 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 no. We do have to help our kids learn how to lose and be okay with losing and be okay with not always winning and be okay with not always getting the goal, not always hitting, that's okay. Um, I think that it's such a deeper conversation, but let's go back to like the bullying side of the fence for the child who is being bullied, because I want to end with this and come back to where we started from, which is the parents, right?
Mhm.
How do parents open the door of communication so that maybe they don't learn so many years later,
Yeah.
but rather they learn in the moment that that's happening for a child? How can they be the support that child needs in the moment they're experiencing those suicidal ideations, those moments? Like what can that look like for our kids who are being bullied?
Yeah. It's a great question and it hits home a great deal. So I think there's three pieces I'd want to hit on today. One is um, role modeling as a parent, role modeling what we're looking for. So Albert Mehrabian was a social scientist who studied communication, creating belief and trust, and he found that 7% of what influences, I'll say, in our children, is based on what we say. So the actual words we're saying. Oh, you got to listen. You got to do this. You got to. 38% is based on how we say those words. If we're
Mm,
telling a story and those types of things. 55% of the influence we have on children is based on what they see us doing.
mm,
So, how often does a parent, and I've seen this quite a bit when I was coaching, they're saying, oh, something's going on here, but you look at them and it's like, wait a minute, we have an opportunity here. And that's a hard conversation, but that's a conversation that needs to be had. That
yeah,
needs to be had. Number
yeah.
two, we talk about listening all the time, and the consultant speak right now is, don't listen to respond, listen to understand. That's good. But what I find is when we get to that place of listening to understand, we're still listening to understand to achieve our own goals, not because we truly care about the actual person. We need to evolve
Mm,
listening to the next level, the loving level. We need to listen to respond so we can help, to understand so we can best help, and because we actually care. So when we actually take that
mm,
time to listen to our child when they're saying X, Y, or Z, and then we ask that open-ended question and then get into the whole tactical aspects to it. But it has to be about loving and it has to be about them, not about us,
yeah.
not about our need as a parent, from our
Mhm.
ego perspective, but how can we best support them? And then
Yeah.
set so
Go
those are two.
ahead.
And then,
The
go ahead,
well,
go
because
ahead,
I had a thought about that.
please.
Um, Here's the thing that I have seen, and especially coming from my expertise in my world. Too many parents jump straight to wanting to fix the problem.
Yeah, yeah,
And I'm gonna tell you right now, you can't always. In fact, more often than not, you're not gonna have a solution. I would highly recommend to parents stop going into fixer mode and just listen.
yeah,
Just listen to be there for them. Just listen to create the very important secure attachment that they need, because there are going to be so many times in your child's life, in a human's life, where there's no other person who can fix the problem. No other person can. And when we sit with our kid in the discomfort of just listening to them tell us about stuff, that's when they come to us more, and that's when they come to us more, and that's when they have the ability to have a release valve, a space that is a release valve for them. That's when the pressure is when it can be released. If they're being bullied at school and there's no immediate solution to the problem, right? Like I couldn't do anything to get that kid out of the school. I mean, I'm very glad that he left and that we didn't have to deal with that anymore, but it could have been an ongoing circumstance. So what I needed to do, and by the way, I didn't first try to give my son solutions to how to address those things, right? First, I simply listened. And I
Mhm.
said, "That's really hard, buddy, because I know you see him as a friend and I know that you like him as a friend. And that's really hard that your friend is doing these things to you." And I simply acknowledged it with him because one of the things kids need the most, beyond anything else, is connection.
Yeah.
They need to know they don't have to feel alone in the experience they're experiencing. They don't always need a ready solution. They simply need to know they're not alone in it. And I think, and this is a human thing. This isn't just a
Mhm.
child, adult thing. This is a human thing. We need to know we're not alone in it. We're not always going to have the solutions, but when we don't feel alone, we're a lot less likely to take ourselves out
Yeah.
of the equation. And
And,
that is the biggest part of all.
and that's the number one positive childhood experience, just what you just described.
Yeah.
Creating that safe space for that discussion about feelings, emotions, and what's happening. And so we try to, and it is complex, and we are complex adaptive systems, but the love doesn't have to change. To truly
Yeah.
care, to listen, to want to help, to be part of the, like you said, to be present. The number one way to stop bullying is be present.
Be
Be it a
present. Yeah.
friend, be a peer. It's be present. We want to make it so complex. Be present.
That's it.
That's number
Yeah.
one.
It's the
Listening,
biggest thing.
talking about feelings is the number one positive childhood experience. So
Yeah.
there's far more to it. Don't get me wrong. And yet, when we really, and the last thing I'll say is, we need to look in our own mirrors as leaders, as friends, as parents, as coach, whatever it might be, because
Yeah.
we got stuff going on too. And this world is really, really hard always, and it seems especially
Yeah.
now so. We need to understand what's shadow, what are we projecting, what's happening, what do I own that I can do something with, when do I need my own agency, when do I need to go seek help myself. And so again, we try to make it way too complex, and there's
I
ways
know.
to help in
I
all
know.
different ways, and it doesn't have to be that complex, and we don't have to fear that we're going to do something wrong, because guess what, we absolutely will, and then we'll fix it and move forward.
We absolutely will. I say that all the time. Expect that you will make mistakes. That is a big part of life. That's just the life that we have.
That's
Expect
right.
you will make mistakes. Understand that, and it's inevitable. You will make mistakes. You will have problems. You will have these things. And I really, really firmly believe that we go so, when we care about people, because we go so quickly into wanting to fix it for them, wanting to help it for them, and this goes to a much deeper place. It's because there's something in our own space that's uncomfortable. It's because we're struggling with the discomfort we're experiencing. And when, as a parent, we actually have to work more on our own discomfort in the face of our child's pain and suffering.
Yeah.
More than anything else, we have to work on that part of us first before we can really be there present with our kids. And and it usually happens almost without fail. Every person I've ever worked with comes to the realization that it's not about the other person, it's about them. Without fail, they come to that realization, "Oh, I gotta work on me. I have to do this for me." And the same thing is true for parents in this setting. It's we have to work on ourselves and how we respond.
Yeah.
Because if you jump right into fixing it for them, when it comes right down to it, bullying is about if you jump right in to be their savior, like we said before, right? You're never gonna teach them how to save themselves.
That's right. That's right.
And they need that more than anything else. They need the tools that will help them survive the things that are going to be adversity and difficulty. Because unfortunately, this world is very imperfect.
That's
And
exactly it.
that is really what it all comes down to. How do we give them the tools they need? And how do we be there for them in the moments they need us? Yeah. Thank you so much, Tom. This was such a magnificent conversation. There's so much more we could unpack today that I mean, obviously we decided we were going for it because I couldn't end without like having your final thoughts on that. I think you've given so many people so much valuable tools and how they can shape it moving forward. You and I are both in very strong agreement when it comes to the policies that we currently have and how we need to change that. And I think with our work and the work other people are doing, my hope is that we will make that change and we will come to a place where we can help people address this in a much more supportive system, individualized plan, right? Support the
Absolutely.
system, individualize the plan, and give us that opportunity to really make a lot of progress to create spaces where people feel more secure. And when they don't, they know where they can go to feel that way. They know where they can go to find the security. Before we go, please, I would love it if you would share where people can find you, where people can reach out to you.
Absolutely happy to, if you don't mind, very quickly. Doug Della Pietra is an amazing healthcare leader. And when he read the first version of my book in this space, he wrote the what if, and I'd love to read it to folks. It's
Yeah,
very short.
please.
He wrote, what if a message of hope, love, care, and communal support reaches all children, such that the idea of hurting self or others that arises from painful feelings and thoughts within them never arose? What if each child never had the thought to bully, harm another, harm self? What if the message of hope, you are enough, you are not alone, and similar, get amplified in such a way that those who would be most vulnerable never had them? What if? And that
Oh,
just,
that hits my heart so much. That's so magnificent. Oh, I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
so
That
if
is the
folks want to
message.
reach me, thank you. If folks want to
Yeah.
reach me, I'm on LinkedIn, also website, dahlberghlg.com. And we wrote a book, The Big Kid in Basketball, and the lessons he's taught his father and coach, me being the father and coach, which is available, which includes many of the things we talked about today and goes in far more detail in each one of them as well. So as I said at the beginning, I just want to help. If people want to reach out in any of those ways, just let me know, and I'll be there.
Tom, thank you so much. You are a magnificent contributor to the world and the spaces of healing and growth and understanding and human connectivity. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you today. I'm so thrilled that we had this conversation. I really do hope that people will get after this. And if you didn't have a chance to listen to the entire conversation today, if you missed this, if you came in late, the replay is always on my LinkedIn events, and you can catch all of the conversations that mattered there. And we will see you all around the next Ben. I hope everyone has a marvelous weekend ahead, an enjoyable Friday, and keep having conversations that matter because every single conversation has worth and value in it.
Thank you, Rona.